Good morning, Karen Salvato, and I want to talk to you about a really not so fun topic, suffering. The next few times that we're together, we're going to talk about suffering and we're going to look at what the Bible has to say about it and see if the way we are approaching it is biblical. We're going to do that. First, I want to start off by telling you whenever I first started researching suffering, I looked up that word in the Bible app, and it's so awesome that you can just put a word in there and it will just start giving you all of these verses that relate to whatever word you put in, and synonyms that go along with that word too. So I did that. I put suffering in there, and do you have any idea how many verses came up? I don't either, because I stopped counting about 70-ish. So there are a lot of verses in God's Word on this topic. The first thing that I really want to make a point of as we talk about this, because you need to know, God cares about your suffering. Why else would He put so much of His Word to that topic? To prepare us, to help encourage us and bring us hope through suffering. God cares about it, and He sees you, He knows you, and He loves you. So please remember that. So we're in this really unique situation right now where a lot of us, well, I guess I'm going to have to say all of us, are dealing with a common suffering right now. The things we've dealt with COVID, with the lockdowns, quarantine, different opinions that can raise issues in relationships with each other, the election coming up, the unrest in our country, all of these things affect us. And they're all things that we all have in common right now. And so I think it would be very wise of us to look at suffering in the Bible and see how we should approach it. So as we jump into this, I've got a little multiple choice for you, okay? There's no wrong answer, but just want to get you to think about this topic. So how do you view suffering? A, something to be avoided at all costs. B, something to endure and forget. Or C, something that will benefit me and others. Be honest with yourself and think about that, of how you view suffering. Now, I have another question for you, that I want you to think about somebody that you look up to as being spiritually mature, maybe wisdom-filled, man, woman, whomever. Think about that person, and what about that person leads you to think about them in that way? Why do you see them as spiritually mature and wisdom-filled? So think about that for a moment too. Also, I want you to think about what has been one thing that's been really difficult for you during this time of COVID, lockdown, quarantine, restrictions. What's been really hard for you to get through? We'll come back to those questions in another time together, but right now this is an introduction that I'm going to give you today, and next time we will get into more about suffering. But first of all, we need a definition of suffering. We need to understand the word that we're talking about and get on the same page. So, definition from the dictionary: to undergo, be subjected to, or endure pain, distress, injury, loss, or anything unpleasant. Now, that last little part of the definition, anything unpleasant, can make it very subjective. What may be suffering for one person may not be considered that for another person. But please, let's don't diminish our suffering. Don't diminish your suffering or somebody else's suffering as not rising to some self-prescribed level that you've created as being, this is suffering or this is not suffering. Because if we do that, if we diminish that, then we're diminishing the work that God can do in us and through us, or in somebody else and through them. So don't diminish your suffering. I have an example of that to help you better understand what I'm talking about. My husband Lane and I have 2 daughters. They're about 4 years apart. Between the two, we had 2 miscarriages. I've never really talked about those very much because I felt like they did not rise to the level of suffering that some other people had experienced. I knew our miscarriages happened early on in pregnancy. I knew some people who had maybe carried full term and then lost their baby, or almost that far. So what I did was just not talk about it because I felt like it didn't rise to that level. And last year I was getting ready for retreat, and I was getting ready to preparing to teach one of the sessions, and it occurred to me that what I was doing by not talking about that, because I felt like it didn't rise to a certain level, I was not allowing God to do a complete work in me by giving me, helping me to heal. And it was definitely hindering God in working through me because nobody knew I had gone through that. So they didn't know that maybe they could talk to me about it. And maybe I had something to offer them on that. So let's don't do that. Don't diminish your suffering. Now, I am not saying you should carry it around and proclaim it to everyone like it's some badge of honor. No, that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is don't push it away and not allow God to do a work in you and through you that He can do in our sufferings. Next time, we're going to talk more about why we suffer and why things happen to us in this world. So for now, that's it, and I will see you next time for part 2. Thanks.